Hello and welcome to our Easter reflections on this Easter Monday. It's good to celebrate on this Easter weekend. We've got sunshine, we've got so much to give thanks for at the moment, but of course we still live in a troubled world. When we go through Holy Week, through that passage of all the anguish and pain that takes us to Maundy Thursday, to Good Friday, to the emptiness of Easter Saturday, to the joy of Easter Day itself. When we go through that passage every year, we do well to remember that we always live in a post-resurrection world. It sounds obvious, but we do well to remember that. Easter, though, itself reminds us of that fact that we are always living our faith in a post-resurrection world. We're not going back and doing Easter again for the first time. We are continuing the remembrance and the celebration of that first Easter. So I want to share with you a passage from Luke's Gospel, where the disciples walk on the road to Emmaus and meet Jesus there. This passage, like so many towards the ends of the Gospels, are passages where people meet Jesus, and so symbolic for each and every one of us for those moments when we feel Jesus has really touched our lives in the deepest and most meaningful ways. So I'm reading from Luke, chapter 24, beginning at verse 13. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them said, whose name was Cleopas, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some of the women in our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it was just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary for the Messiah to suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. They came near the village to which they were going. He walked ahead as if he were going on, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us when he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord is risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told them what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of bread. I want to share with you one final reflection from the book that we've been using, Encountered, Meeting God in Ordinary Places by Claire Benton-Evans. This final reflection takes us back to an early part of the Lent course that we used in for our churches here in Roundhay, and reflects on that road to Emmaus. When we think of the story of those two disciples on the road to Emmaus, we tend to imagine a contemplative stroll through a shaded landscape, a casual conversation delightfully interrupted by the risen Lord. However, this image was overturned when one modern commentator placed the story in the context of a war zone, not unlike present-day Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria. The two disciples were co-conspirators on the run. Their leader has been executed. Their associates are in hiding. And these two are heading for a safe house at Emmaus, with the religious authorities and the Roman army at their heels. The precise location of the original Emmaus is a matter for debate. Some claim it is a Roman city of Emmaus, Nicopolis, which is shown on Roman maps lying about 19 miles west of Jerusalem. Others say it is more likely to be a Palestinian village, the village of Emmaus or Amos, about 16 miles west of Jerusalem. Some ancient versions of Luke's Gospel agree with this distance. It seems likely, then, that the fugitives walked considerably further than 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and that they walked westwards. Since they were travelling in the later part of the day, they would have been heading into the sun for about 4 or 5 hours. Towards the end of their walk, as they approached Emmaus, night would have fallen fast, much faster than it does in Britain, where we are used to gently dwindling twilight. This close to the equator, daylight becomes darkness in the space of about half an hour. Only the most foolhardy traveller would continue to walk at night. Travel, of course, and don't forget, was a risky business in Jesus' time. Think of the parable of the Good Samaritan, a man beaten and robbed by bandits who were hiding on such a road, waiting to catch the unwary and the unprotected traveller. It must have been a common occurrence, especially in the rocky terrain around Jerusalem, which offered many hiding places for thieves. Towards nightfall, it was essential for travellers to find food and lodging wherever they could. And homeowners were readily offering hospitality to unexpected visitors. That was the way of it. And that way still happens in much of the Middle East today. So someone in Emmaus that night may well have prepared a meal for those two in readiness. And it seems obvious to them that Jesus should share it with them. And of course, we read he accepts it without too much fuss. But imagine you are one of those fugitives escaping from Jerusalem that afternoon, with your head full of the terrifying events of the last few days, your heart broken by the disappointment of all your hopes. Jesus is dead and your life is in danger. So you take to the stony, dusty road with many hours walking ahead of you and the sun in your eyes. You do what you can to shield your face with your clothes around your head. The stranger who joins you, though, is similarly covered, coverings over his head and face. Perhaps you might be afraid of him at first, worried that he's a spy come to betray your whereabouts to the authorities. Fear gives way to disbelief when he appears completely ignorant of all the recent events which fill your thoughts, which you presumed everybody knew about in Jerusalem. He starts to walk with you, and the miles roll by unnoticed as he talks. So interesting to listen to. His wisdom stirs you, and you've not felt like this since Jesus last talked to you. Imagine quickening your steps as night falls, and you see the little lights of Emmaus glowing in the distance, and that's your target, and that's where you hurry. As darkness claims the road you have walked, you arrive in the village and are astounded to see your mysterious companion go to carry on walking into the night. What on earth would he be doing? Is he mad? So you press him to come inside with you and to eat and to rest for the night. Imagine the relief of being inside then, off the dangerous road, arriving safe and sound and being welcomed, receiving cool water for your hands and feet. You sink into a seat at the table. How inviting is the cup and a hunk of fresh bread. And then something about the bread and the wine stops you in your tracks. And you look the stranger full in the face as he utters familiar words of blessing, words which you heard only a few days earlier. He smiles, and you suddenly realize who he is. Your mouth drops open and you sit there frozen. Then he's gone. And with an uneaten meal still on the table, you're both galvanized into action, gabbling excitedly about what just happened between you. Without a word of debate or decision, you grab your stuff and head out into the pitch black on the dangerous walk back to Jerusalem, back to the lion's den, where anyone might recognize you, and where Roman soldiers are standing armed at every turn, looking for other known troublemakers to round up. Yet you retrace your steps, walking for another 4 hours or more through the night towards your fellow believers. Imagine doing that. The risk, the worry, the anguish, but also the excitement of rushing back on that Easter night in the early hours of the Monday morning. Think of the risks, the personal cost, but above all, that encounter which inspires you to walk back. That's what's driving you, and that's the kind of feeling which might drive our faith today. I want to close with prayer. Let us pray. Jesus Christ, you meet us. Your hands still with holes in them, but your breath warm, your conversation engaging. Death has not changed your accent or diminished your love. And though the world should still show signs of its imperfection, the good news is that you have destined it and all its people to be made whole. So, on this Easter Monday, as we sit in separate houses, we think of those disciples on the road, sharing a meal with Jesus. May we be cheered by your gospel. Join us as you joined your first disciples, and make our prayers, our worship, your Emmaus Road. Amen. Thank you. I hope you have a blessed Easter. Good night. God bless.